Now available in paperback and e-readers, Esteemed Season of the Witch Girl. The aspiring angel takes on a wicked teenage witch in this action-packed, all-new Esteemed series adventure. Pick up your copy of Esteemed Season of the Witch Girl in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers today. Over the course of the Spinsterella series of books, we get to see the Matilda Crowley character grow up as a part of the goth scene. And over the course of all 4 books in the Spinsterella series, we are taken through the decades of the goth scene from the 1980s up until the 20-teens and see Matilda's journey as she's become a part of the goth subculture. Now, Matilda's story starts with the novel Spellbound, where she's a teenager in the 1980s, and as she's a teenager in the 1980s, she's in what goths call her baby bat years, and in those baby bat years, she's basically learning the foundations of the goth subculture, which is the music and how the music makes people express themselves by dressing up in dark clothes to represent their darker view of life. And in that whole viewpoint she has, it ties to her viewpoints about black culture and the obsession with conformity and what I call the spellbound mindset. Now, the spellbound mindset is all about black people looking to fit themselves into black boxes are acceptable to white people, but not looking to be themselves. And this is what Matilda is pushing back on as related to things, because she's learned a completely different black culture from her mother and her white father, and learned about the traditions of black culture from her neighbor, Mrs. Purvis, about the old school black culture. And that's all part of what Matilda is all about as she is a teenager and learning how to be her actual self and not be what people want to make her into. That's what Spellbound is about as related to her being growing up in the 1980s. And it's all a commentary on the 1980s with Spellbound and that whole era as related to the goth subculture and the foundations of the goth subculture. And after Spellbound and Matilda's story, we see her forming her own identity under her goth name, Mad Matilda, and that's what leads into the legendary Mad Matilda, the story of Matilda Crowley in 1995. Now, in 1995, Matilda is Mad Matilda, the queen of the industrial goth raves, and she's basically looking to graduate from Columbia University, where her father used to work. And as she's graduating, she's thinking about what direction she wants to take her life in the 1990s as a 21-year-old woman. Now, this 21-year-old woman basically wants to stay in the goth scene because she feels accepted by the world, but she's fitting herself in this box, again, as related to the goth subculture, and not seeing how she is a part of the real world. And that's where the legendary Mad Matilda, again, shows goth in the 90s, because it was a part of, again, of a period where goth was growing as a subculture and becoming more known because of all of the talk shows that were out here trying to present goths as freaks and making all sorts of caricatures. But what I wanted to do with Mad Matilda was show how Matilda was a person, and as a person who was a baby bat in the 80s, was dealing with the changes of life in the 90s, and how those changes in life in the 90s were shaping her as related to what type of adult she wanted to be, and what type of adult she wanted to be not only in the goth scene, but in the larger part of the world. So with Mad Matilda, again, I saw how goth was changing in the 1990s. And again, as it was changing as a subculture, it was going through what I would call growing pains. And that's what Matilda was going through with the 90s. That was what that era was all about. Now, people wanted to, again, fit goth into a box that was acceptable to the mainstream. But goths were out here defining themselves in the world. And as the world was changing and we were going from the 90s to the 2000s, this is where I decided to do the largest Spinsterella book, Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer. Now, Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer was a book I originally did not plan to do. I originally just was going to leave it as a Spinsterella trilogy or Matilda trilogy, but I felt that people really needed to see that era of the 2000s and all the changes that went on in the goth scene. And as those changes went on in the 2000s, I mean, this is where we started to see the goth subculture start to become more defined as a subculture. We started to see people defining themselves as the internet basically changed goth, because the mainstream networks, they wanted to make a narrative about goths being antisocial, which wasn't true at all. And as goths started speaking for themselves on places like the internet with AOL instant messaging, creating their own websites and starting their own businesses, we started to see the narrative get a lot of pushback as related to the mainstream narrative. And as we entered into the 2000s, this is where the whole perception of goth really started to further change in the aftermath of events like Columbine, where they tried to project the stereotype of goths being violent and antisocial, when goths had nothing to do with Columbine at all. No, I'm going to go in depth on that in another video about the difference between an introvert and an antisocial person, because there is a huge difference between an introvert and an antisocial person, and that's what was happening in the year 2000. And again, the year 2000 was a major time of change for the goth scene, because we saw more goths starting their own businesses and the start of e-commerce that was coming out. I mean, before that, it was mail order with companies like Lip Service as related to getting goth fashion. And this is where we started to see a major transition from the music to the fashion, and a little bit of a divide as related to people in the goth scene, as related to some people want to be true to the music, others want to explore the worlds of fashion, art, and literature. And that's why the book Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer is so big, because it's a major period of change. That 1 year was a major period of change, because we had the internet basically becoming a platform for a lot of people who were alternative. It was a major platform as related to the subculture. There were a lot of changes going on. People were going from, again, creating their own outfits by going to the thrift store and making their own stuff, to us seeing more businesses come up, making more of a presence as related to e-commerce and being able to reach more customers. And we started to see more people being influenced by the art, the music, and the growing forms of expression. We started to see a lot more people feeling more expressive, and that's what was happening in the year 2000 that basically influenced things as related to the 2000s. And as we came out of the 2000s, we then entered into the 20 teens, and in the era of the 20 teens, this is where the e-commerce turned into what I would believe to be the modern goth scene as related to the whole conflict as related to commercialization. I mean, that's where we have the companies now like Killstar and Punk Rave and all these different companies. I mean, these companies basically came out of the 2000s and the e-commerce. And I mean, as I was writing this whole series, I mean, I covered basically 4 decades of goth and learned about 4 decades of goth as I was writing the series. And it really was a very interesting story, because as we see Matilda take this journey into the goth scene, this is the first book where you can read an entire 4 books and see a character age. I mean, we go from Matilda being 16 years old in Spellbound to 21 in Legendary Mad Matilda, to being 26 in Goth Girl Summer, to 40 in Spinsterella. And basically we see someone growing up in the goth scene and growing older in the goth scene. And as they're growing older, they are seeing this as a lifestyle over the course of those 4 decades. 4 decades with 4 different stories about the same character. And as I was writing Goth Girl Summer, I was starting to feel old myself, you know. I mean, I started to feel old because I'm writing this character and I'm seeing this character age over time. And seeing them age over time was one of those things that really affected me as I was writing the 4th book, Goth Girl Summer. As I was writing the 4th book, you know, I saw how my style had changed as a writer, and I saw how perspectives changed. I mean, writing 26-year-old Matilda at 51 was really was an interesting thing, because I remember, again, being 26 in 2000, and I drew from that experience, and I drew from that to write this book, and I just drew from it, and it just made me really think about getting older and growing older over time. And it was, again, a lot of fun writing all four of these books, because what I wanted to do was show people how goth is a lifestyle, and show how someone can stay in the subculture and grow older in the subculture and still be themselves, because the whole point of the Matilda stories was about her being herself and living an abundant life that Christ wanted people to live, by just being herself and having the courage to be herself as she finds her voice. As she finds her voice over the course of 4 books, she becomes herself and actualizes her potential over the course of the 4 books. I mean, over the course of the 4 books, I see this character grow and change over the course of the 4 books, and that's one of the great things about writing this entire series that was so much fun, was seeing this character grow and actualize her potential over the course of the different books. And it was again a lot of fun writing this series, and I really enjoyed writing it. I mean, it just basically, again, with Goth Girl Summer, it basically felt like the end as related to Matilda's story. I wrapped up all the story points, and it felt, again, like this whole summer vacation basically showed how this character grew and basically completed her story. I mean, it was a lot of fun writing the story about a black goth character, and I'm not finished writing black goth characters. I have other characters like Lilith Graves, who's a part of the John Haynes series. She has her own book, Eternal Night, where Matilda makes a cameo appearance in. And then there are other characters I've written, like Colleen Anderson, who's in the Thetas, or the Death character from John Haynes. I mean, I really like writing black goth characters, and I hope to write more black goth characters. Will I come back to Spinsterella? Maybe I'll come back one day. But until then, I believe that, again, I've gone over 4 decades of goth, and really, I think, again, really, that was a lot to do, and really show how this character, growing older in the goth scene, again, seeing a character, again, grow older over the course of books, that was something that really it really had an impact on me, because I never thought you could just write a character and watch them grow older and make several satisfying stories that I believe would give readers perspective on goth through the years. Now, if you want to check out the books of the Spinsterella series, you can find all 4 paperbacks on Amazon.com, and you can also find them in digital format on Kindle and other online booksellers like Draft to Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble's Nook, and other online booksellers like the Apple Bookstore. And if you want to see me be able to continue making more goth fiction or write more stories featuring goth characters, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App to help me continue publishing stories that present what I believe to be a balanced perspective of black people in the goth scene. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes, A Thorn in My Side. The man who rules the world takes on an agent from the CIA from the Black Boule in this all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes' A Thorn in My Side in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. Coming to paperback and e-readers, Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer. Take a trip into the macabre world of goth modeling in the new millennium in this all-new Spinsterella story. Pre-order your copy of Spinsterella Goth Girl Summer at Amazon.com and other online booksellers everywhere. Support Black-owned and Black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.